Based on the recording. So thank you again, Shankar Rao, for this wonderful introduction. Quickly, today, the topic that I'm going to be talking about is the role of intellectual property rights and technology transfer in academic institutions. So that's basically been my, this area has been basically my passion, and I've been associated with tech transfer for nearly 15 years now. So aside from what Shankar Rao said, a quick introduction of myself is that my background is in biotechnology. I've also got a degree in business, in finance in specific, and then I have some background in patent law with my patent agent designation. I have during the course of my tenure in the workforce, worked both in the corporate and the university setting. I used to work for Tata's, and then have moved around working in companies in Canada and then the US for predominantly 20 years now, mostly in the academic sector. I, at this point in time, work for University of Delaware in the Office of Economic Innovations and Partnerships, and I'm also a board member of one of the largest association that houses tech transfer professionals called the Autumn, and I'll be talking a little bit about Autumn, and do consulting with many Indian firms and agencies in and around the world, along with India, of course, in Europe and Africa as well. So I've also been on the advisory role of several organizations. So that's kind of a little bit about my background, just to set the stage and give you an idea of why I think this subject is of great importance to me. So before we begin, I'm going to actually start with a couple of things that I want to eventually get out of the way, and one is definitions itself. So as I have done tech transfer around the world, I've realized that some of these definitions of tech transfer vary from the part of the world that you are in, and so I want to make sure that we cross all the bridges. So at this point in time, I want to begin by saying that, as you all know, that property can be of many types. So no matter what saints and sages say that you should not be associated with properties and you should have this philosophical idea of being away from material world, the reality of the matter is we are all surrounded by property. And the three kinds of property that we can sort of bucket together are personal property, like the property that you own, your money, your personal assets, real estate property, and then of course the property that comes with us being Homo sapiens, one of the most advanced organism on the face of the earth, which is intellectual property. So today we are going to be talking more about this intellectual property, and due to the fact that the word intellectual is affiliated with this topic, we call whatever comes out of our minds as a creation as intellectual property. But oftentimes you would have heard this term, particularly in the East, called IPR. And IPR is nothing but rights that is granted by agencies for the intellectual property that you eventually develop, which means that it is basically the intellectual property that you protect that helps you to develop what we call the intellectual property rights. And that's going to be the front and center and the basic element that's going to enable us to do technology transfer. Another couple of definitions I want to clear, and we've all heard about invention. So as human beings, we always find solutions to problems, and the word invention is virtually a household name. But there's a difference between invention and innovation, and that's something, again, I want to clarify. And the difference primarily comes from the fact that innovations are inventions that have a commercial leg on them. And you may have the best and brightest ideas, but oftentimes when we talk about transferring those technologies, it's important to have innovation as your seat and cornerstone of what you have developed to be something that could be transferred, only because it has its commercial attribute, which makes it different. So hopefully I've been able to cover some of these definitions. Now, as I give this lecture, I want to just be mindful that most of the audience members here may be ones that are sort of new to tech transfer, as Shankar pointed out. So I'm going to keep this talk very, very low level, but entertain any discussions that you would want to have with me in the next 30 minutes, or have any questions in this area that might be of importance and you would want to raise. And I can obviously speak about any of these topics in great lengths, but I'm going to keep it very, very low, just for the general understanding of where we are with with this particular area. So as part of my talk, I will be covering IPR and technology transfer, talking a little bit about success stories that come out of here, some of the workings of tech transfer as I have been involved personally in this area for many years. I will talk a little bit about some of the common intellectual property protection, vis-a-vis just a little bit, touching a little bit about patents. Obviously, again, these topics are all of great importance and can be spoken at length, and virtually a workshop can be conducted around these, but I'm going to keep it to that. I'll talk a little bit about the license deal and what it means to have a license, which is the primary tool for technology transfer to actually happen, which is the exchange of a fair share for the intellectual property that is generated. Speak a little bit about the current situation of technology transfer in the COVID crisis at this point in time. Mention a little bit about the current issues that we are facing in India. And for those young folks that are interested in technology transfer, touch upon some of the career attributes of tech transfer that they may be interested to do, particularly in the Indian subcontinent, where tech transfer is sort of in the rise and a lot of individuals are wanting to actually get into this area. So a lot to cover in the next 30 minutes, so please bear with me. I will be going really quick, but once again, the chat box is open for questions, and I'm always to your discretion. If you have any further questions, I can always be tapped for queries that you may have. So let's begin with what tech transfer is, and the way I describe it is sometimes that it's a profession that is most important, but nobody knows about. For odd reasons, when you talk about tech transfer, people would roll their eyes in a layman world, because they just don't know what it is. And having said that, everything that you are really touching upon today has been a byproduct of technology transfer. So this computer that you're using today, as you know, more than 9,000 patents around it inside, so you can't see what those patents are and how it's working. But we are using this computer, the keyboard, the mouse, the platform, Zoom that we are using. Think of anything that you are really looking around, you know, the wall that your house is with the paint coated on it, the material with which the windows were made, those were all products of tech transfer. So when I say tech transfer, it's basically that all these technologies had been invented at some time or the other, and then this invention has been taken to the marketplace, and we as consumers have eventually bought these technologies, and in some respects paid back dividends to the actual inventors of these technologies. So there's so much that has happened before we even delve into using these products, and yet the profession of tech transfer is hidden and nobody gets to know. So at this point in time, as I speak today, of course, I'm not going to be talking about corporate tech transfer, which is a big subject in and of itself. I'll be talking about academic tech transfer, which is basically folks like myself and many others who may be joining today that are involved in the act of transferring innovations into products that would go into the marketplace. So we are the people who actually work as conduits that transfer these technologies from where they are as an early stage innovation that comes in the minds of people into the commercial marketplace. And because we are academicians, and as we know, by principle, academicians are folks that are associated with either universities or institutes, or they're associated with the organizations that are mostly educational. They are not in the task of manufacturing products. And because of the fact that they don't manufacture products, you would not see, you know, a laptop that was made by IIT, but you'd see a laptop that was made by IBM. However, there may be technologies from IIT that's gone into an IBM or Dell, and that's because there has to be some collaboration that has to happen between an academic setup and a commercial entity that may pick up that idea, the technology, and then make it to get manufactured. So what we do as our profession of tech transfer is that we take these innovations and we turn them into products by virtue of using either corporations, larger companies that may be interested in making these products into commercial material, or we actually create startups around these technologies, and these startups are good vehicles for these technologies to get into the hands of the commercial products. So we have these two vehicles, and the possibility, at least in the US, at the very least in the US, for this to have happened was based on an act that was passed in 1980, where most of the academic institutions were given a choice to own the intellectual property and then do whatever they want to do to eventually make them into products. So it was very important act that eventually enabled institutions like ours to eventually make these technologies to be available in the marketplace. And lo and behold, it's been about 40 plus years now since the Bayh-Dole Act was formulated, and there are lots of countries that have eventually found this act to be of benefit to them as well. And in and around the world, there are approximately 25 other countries that have either adopted the Bayh-Dole Act or are at least considering to adopt the Bayh-Dole Act. Unfortunately, India is not in this space, and I still recall several years ago when Kapil Sibal, one of honorable cabinet ministers, wanted to put together a Bayh-Dole Act for the Indian legislation, but somehow fell short. So India does not belong to this space of having a Bayh-Dole Act in place, but short of that, again, there are lots of agencies which I'll talk about that do tech transfer. So in the last 20 years, what has Bayh-Dole done to the US? Significant. It's a huge impact that Bayh-Dole has created for the country. And here's some statistics that has been generated by Autumn, the agency that has most of the tech transfer professionals around, that reflects to the kind of impact that Bayh-Dole has had to the general gross domestic product of the country. And this is just enormous, because as you see, if you just scan your eyes around, that more than 200 drugs and vaccines have been developed, and Bayh-Dole has actually contributed to as much as 865 billion into the gross domestic product of the country. So it's huge impact is obviously well appreciated, due to which other countries are now stepping into the role of doing and adopting the Bayh-Dole, as I mentioned in the previous slide. So short of having a Bayh-Dole in place, tech transfer in India is basically done through a bunch of offices, and for the benefit of those that are attending this talk, as you know, there are some that are from IIT as well, and IIT Mumbai, IRCC, FITT, and all these acronyms are written here. IIT Kharagpur, SR, IC are agencies that assist with tech transfer roles, just the way it happens here in the US, with most universities having tech transfer offices, that any scientist that is actually developing something new, offices that are there for the Indian Institute of Technology would be able to assist. And if it wasn't for these offices, then the tech transfer functionality would happen, but it would be in short course. So these are just list of offices that, depending on what your agency or your institute is, can actually take benefit of to get their ideas and IPRs into the commercial marketplace. So just to give a general idea, as I mentioned, academic institutions cannot make manufactured technologies, so they cannot manufacture their ideas because they are not in the business of commercialization. So just a general scheme of things that can be plugged here, and if you go from the left to the right of this particular screen, you'll see that academic institutions actually are the seat of most of the ideas and where the IP comes from. And to the left, you see the academia doing this. And tech transfer professionals have the role of trying and capturing these ideas into intellectual property rights, and then trying and seeking for collaborations where they eventually interact with the industry to get the technology from its early stage that the academic institutes have provided them to a later stage. And NSF here in the US considers those development in TRLs, technology readiness levels. And so if you look at the third tier, you'll see that as the knowledge is getting developed, the technology is also getting developed in due course with collaborations with industries. And finally, you'll see the technology getting from TRL 1 through TRL 9 when it's more of a commercial product and in the hands of consumers through the industrial development. So that's the scheme of things that a technology has to go through, and tech transfer professionals are somewhat active in the entire business of doing it now. Give a general highlight of what it is. So let me quickly give a little introduction of the office that I work for, and the intent of doing that is just to give you an idea of where Bidol has taken us and how tech transfer happens in the US, and like I mentioned, in some respects also in India now with those agencies that I listed in the previous slide, except that those agencies are affiliated to institutes, and the institutes have to be the agencies that will eventually do the tech transfer for folks that are in, let's say, institutes like yours in IIT. So University of Delaware, for those who've been here, we are actually the second smallest state in the US. US has 50 states, but we pride for the fact that we are small and we do a lot of stuff in the innovation space. We have a very prolific university where I work, the University of Delaware, where incidentally our President Joe Biden is from, and this is the sprawling university, and we again from a geographical standpoint are located sort of midway between New York City and Washington DC. So in the corridor where a lot of activities are happening, and we have a chain of very strong academic institutions in and around our organization. University of Delaware is very old. It was established in 1743. For the benefit of those in India, 1743 obviously is almost a few centuries ago, and literally in a historic sense, just about when the Britishers were trying to get into India. And that's when this university was established, and it's giving you a scale of how old the university has been. But in due course, it has actually gotten the rank of being the top 33rd public universities in the country. And as you all know, in the US, universities of our scale have two basic job functionality. One being, of course, education, and the other being research. So we do research in the vicinity of $180 million, getting up, and so we are trying to hit the $200 million range. But we are doing prolific research, and generally, as an outcome of the research, what we see is intellectual property being generated. So if you look at the box on the bottom right, in my office that handles most of the technology transfer activities, has as many as 419 invention disclosures. It's creeping up. We have 132 issued patents. We have consummated about 65 licenses to date. And then startups are obviously something that we put a lot of effort on, and we are upwards of 30 startups that are formed in our existence. And just to give you a general sense, our office has been in existence for about 10 years now. So we have 7 colleges, and we are also a land, sea, space grant university, which means we have a lot of good and high quality research happening. So this is very similar to many of the academic universities that are sort of in our scale, where we generate as many as roughly 50 to 60 invention disclosures every year, and then we work our way through to try and get those disclosures to something of value. So before I move on to the next section of my talk, I want to just give you a little bit of a backstory about some of the technologies that my office has handled. And you'll just appreciate from these stories, hopefully, as to the kind of stuff that we do and the kind of work that we eventually have to mind on a day-to-day basis. So here's a picture of John Elias and Wayne Westerman. One was a professor and the other postdoc, having done PhD from University of Delaware. They developed a keyboard that, as you see, is being held by them with a lot of pride, which was basically solving the problem of folks that had carpal tunnel, that they had issues with their thumb. And so if you remember, and this is back in 1998, if you remember, they had those tedious keyboards that you have to actually press the buttons to type. And so these two individuals, they had the thought that if they actually generate and make a keyboard that is made on glass, the amount of effort that one has to put into getting this this keyboard to work is not going to be as significant as it would be in the regular keyboard. So they developed this very neat design, and then came to our office, gave us reams of paper that really looked like algorithms, and we didn't know head or tail of what to do with it. As always, we didn't think that there was any value in getting a technology like this to even patent. But anyway, we hesitantly went ahead and patented this technology. And they turned around and said they wanted to start a business around it. So we gave the technology to the company, and lo and behold, again, this company was started as Fingerworks, and the technology was sort of taken to the next level, where it was eventually made into a product that today everyone has in their pockets and tables. You may be wondering what the technology is, and you're right. Steve Jobs picked this technology up, and his design of the first iPhone had the integration of this keyboard, which was actually being replaced by the tedious dial that used to happen in those BlackBerry cell phones, and this became to be called the touchscreen technology. So what you see as a touchscreen technology really emerged from University of Delaware through our tech transfer office, and eventually was taken on and is somewhat a technology that is for household. So just to give you a general scale of what happens when invention disclosures come to our office, that these disclosures are very early stage. We oftentimes don't appreciate the scale and the functionality of these until there is a company that eventually picks it up and makes it into some product. So this is one that happened in my office, so I can give you a first-hand report. And it was very, very rewarding to see. And it still is when I meet with folks and they say that, yes, this is a university-related invention that came through our office. Here's a gentleman, his name is Dr. Norm Wagner. He, in my opinion, is a magician because he actually worked with a technology that was developed along with DoD. And he basically made what we call today as a shear thickening fluid textile. So it's magic, really, that if you actually go to his lab, he's going to give you a sheet of textile, and he'll give you a knife to try your best to stab into the textile. So you take a knife and you try to stab in, and believe it or not, this simple textile is unstabbable. You cannot stab into that textile because it's basically a technology that emerged from a methodology that he uses that we call shear thickening fluid, where the moment you put pressure on that particular material, the material gets transformed into something that's extremely hard and rock solid. And so this was developed basically for warriors that were heading out to, in those days, the Gulf War, and it basically was an anti-stab technology. So eventually it made nice armors. Other than the fact that this was being used by soldiers, the technology came to our office and we were really looking and searching to find applications for these. So as we looked around, we found one very neat application where it was used for surgical gloves. So people or doctors that do surgery that get pierced by knife edges were eventually alleviated from that using this technology. And very fascinating technology that also came to play was when one of the sports apparel company, Reebok, picked it up and made them into women's apparel, brassiers for sports application. And so that's the application that developed from a technology that just didn't even look like it was. It was of any value really, other than the fact that it was magic. But eventually you'll see the technology has now taken off, and it's among one of the hot technologies by some of these private companies that have picked it up. Similarly, whom you see at the bottom is Harsh Bass and Janine. These are inventors that have invented a strain of bacteria that was attributing to better growth of plants, Bacillus subtilis, and that bacteria was eventually commercialized to BASF and is now being sold. And this is a picture that the inventor actually went to one of the stores and took a click with the storekeeper to show to me how proud she was to see her technology eventually in the marketplace. And you see the technology is actually being sold. It gives a very good antipathogenic impact to plants. Is a growth stimulant, and is actually being sold worldwide through BSF to many of the growers and farmers, including penetrating into the Indian market that we're going to be doing very soon, maybe in a year or so. So these are some of the innovations. I'll just quickly run through. Cerebral palsy is a problem with many kids that have muscular dystrophy, so they have ambulatory issues. Here is an invention that came from a group of inventors where they actually developed something called an artificial muscle, and this technology is also being commercialized. You can imagine what it would be if artificial muscles were being generated, where you can actually implant muscles in human beings that have problems with muscle generation. So a combination of both mechanical, electrical, and software technology that are merged together in several patents that eventually will hit the marketplace hopefully soon, and we are working together in that space. Another technology, these are basically simulation devices for nurses. As you know, nurses, when they get trained, it's very hard for them to get trained on real patients. So a technology that came from a couple of nurses from University of Delaware that have developed simulation devices for acts like intravenous injections, for catheterization, for tracheostomy. So this technology eventually is developed by them, and they eventually turned around and decided to start a business around it. And many nurses today are trained on their devices, and they're doing a phenomenal job. Similarly, drug development is a space that many academic institutions get involved with. I have also had the privilege of being in one of them with the pancreatic drug development program, where the technology again is an early stage drug molecule and has eventually shown some value. So these were all University of Delaware's, but I'll just give you a general idea of some of the technologies that have come from the US that you are using on a household basis right now. Many of you, when you have allergic reactions, you use Allegra. So as you know, Allegra is a medicine that was developed from Georgetown University and is now being commercialized through a pharmaceutical company. Those that have problems with smoking, you may have heard about the nicotine patch. Nicotine patch was developed by University of California, Los Angeles. Google, the very search engine page that you're using, was actually an early stage development. It was called PageLink algorithm, and that developed at the time when internet was just being evolved, and realistically it did not look like a company that would even fly. And now it's one of the largest companies, and almost everyone uses Google today for their search engine, developed at Stanford University, and there's a fascinating story behind it. Various agricultural products, Honeycrisp apples from University of Minnesota. The N95 mask that you're using through COVID is a product of invention that came from University of Tennessee. And then if you ever sit on the plane and you wonder why you can get internet, maybe at a little fee, it's because internets and planes nowadays have been made possible through invention that came from University of Maryland. So these are some of the academic tech transfer highlights and success stories that you may or may not even know that basically came from the academic institutions. And the reason why, again, I'm telling you this is because you will, in due course of time, also probably get into a situation where either you want to get involved in the profession, or you would be an inventor yourself and you'd want to put that product into the marketplace. And if you have to, then you'll have to take the help of tech transfer professionals that can take the technologies through. So obviously, as you can see, because of the BIDOL, which happened some 40 plus years ago, and because of all the activities that have happened in the tech transfer space, here's an infographic that gives you a general idea of how much contributions have happened only in 1 year of technology transfer that has happened in the US. And you see, for a research and development budget coming from the federal government in the order of $83.1 billion, we have been able to churn around through invention about roughly 27,000 invention disclosures, through evaluation, IP protection, where 17,000 plus US patents were filed, 8,000 of which eventually were issued and licensed off in numbers that were more than 10,000 to yield as many as 900 plus new technologies in just the 1 year. So this cycle, the cycle of fortune, is eventually still spinning, and every year Autumn develops these statistics and data to give the general value to the professional professional ideas that how much we have been able to be successful. So the reason why I'm bringing this up in a talk like today is because of this. So this table that you see may look like the Olympics medal tally, but really isn't, because you see all the countries that are listed here are kind of the ones that were sort of on the higher list of the Olympic medal tally. But you'll see one significant country that is playing a big role at number 5 is India. And what this title or this graph really is the top 10 R&D spending companies for 2021. And you see India is now emerging as one of the top countries that is spending a lot in research and development. And the reason why I mentioned this in this particular talk is because as India is spending a lot of money in research and development, there definitely has to be some level of technology transfer that has to happen in order to justify for the research and development money that's going in. And that technology transfer has to happen through a methodology that some other countries listed on the table have adopted. And I'm thinking that India will catch up and we'll see some great impact happening in the next few years in the technology transfer space in India as well. So let me quickly, again, I'm going to this is just a general idea of telling you how the process works. And as you all know, that at the Tech Transfer Office, what we do is we collect a lot of invention disclosures. So this is a process that we eventually follow every single day for every invention disclosure that we get. For the research that happens, we get a disclosure. We then do the evaluation of the disclosure, and the evaluation is basically to check whether the disclosure is unique, novel. And once we see that, we eventually do a protection. So once the protection is done, we call it what we would call an IPR. And then we look for folks that can eventually collaborate and take the technology to the next level. If we find a good match, we do what we call a licensing, a deal that is basically the best modus for us to operate. And then once the licensing is done, the company, along with the university, works towards commercializing this technology. So just to give you a general idea again, this is how an invention disclosure takes place. So as the faculty does research and wants to publish, they're also obligated to come to our office if they have anything that they have invented. So a form is there up on the website. They fill up the form, send it to us. We do a little search to check that there is enough novelty in this technology. And if you find novelty in the technology that they have provided us, we go ahead and protect it. And the protection routes that we have are either patents, we go to the trademark route, we either file design patents. If it's a plant, we do plant variety protection, or if none of them apply and if it's viable for us, we even do trade secrets. And then we eventually, by virtue of doing these, eventually go out and provide the technology for looking to seek partners in this particular area. Patents are, of course, the 90% of what we get as invention disclosures are patents. And as you all know, and I don't have to go into great detail about these, and that patents are granted to an inventor to exclude others from making, using, or selling the product. And there is obviously an entire mechanism operated by the US patent law that eventually assists with filing of patents. And as you all know, patents are given for a limited period of time, and a patent is basically jurisdiction based. So a patent in the US has to be different from a patent in India, has to be different from a patent in Europe, so on and so forth. So every country has a different jurisdiction on which they work these patents on. But there is the act of us to file patents, and there are what we call foreign patent filings that we can sometimes do to eventually capture the technology. So to file a patent, the one thing that we have to do, and as again, this must be pretty basic for many folks, we need to make sure that the invention disclosure that we have found is useful, it's novel, it's non-obvious, and is fully disclosed to us. These are the 4 things that we look for every invention disclosure to make sure that these technologies are patentable. So as far as being useful is concerned, obviously invention disclosure always are useful, otherwise they won't come to us. As far as novelty is concerned, we have to make sure that the novelty aspect is taken care of by doing what we call prior art searches. We try to see if this technology has been developed by anybody else. Unfortunately, if it has been developed by anybody else, we have to find out that particular piece that has not been developed, and so we kind of carve out a patent to make sure that what the inventor has done is only what is novel and is not something that somebody else has done. So we try to work on that, and we try to see whether the invention is non-obvious. Now, the non-obviousness part is the trickier part, and I'll give you a general example to give you a sense of what non-obviousness means. And in general, of course, it means that you can't basically commingle 2 inventions and then say that the new invention that has come from the commingling of the 2 inventions is mine. Giving you an example, as you all know, we all used razors. If you recall, those who are sort of probably my age, at the time when we started shaving, and guys did, the razors were one single blade, and there was a lot of ouch factor to it because these single blades used to hurt. So Gillette came with this idea that you can actually use 2 blades, and so they went ahead, patented that product, telling the patent office that 2 blades are better than 1. And the patent office thought, wow, that's a neat idea, and yes, we offer you a patent. Gillette then eventually invented a 3rd blade, and then found out that having 3 blades is better than 2, and went to USPTO and said, well, now we have a 3-blade razor, should be or could be patented. And to be honest, the USPTO looked at it, thought about it hard, and then decided that, all right, maybe 3 is better than 2, so we'll go ahead and give it. But guess what happened? When they came with the 4th blade and the 5th blade, USPTO said, no, this wouldn't work. Because if 2 is better than 1, 3 is better than 2, 4 will have to be better than 3. So that's sort of the idea that you get from the non-obviousness factor. So if you have an invention that has such kind of non-obviousness issue, which is kind of subjective, you will not get a patent. And this is, of course, an easy example, but we eventually fight it out every single day as we get these invention disclosures in our office. What you can invent, there's a list. You can have machines, you can have processes, you can have articles of manufacture, composition of matter. There's a whole bunch of things that you cannot invent, and there's always a controversy. And I'll not go into all this detail because that calls for a long discussion, and I don't have that much time. But I'll be more than happy to talk to you on those. But eventually, at the end of the day, what we in the Tech Transfer Office are looking for is a strong patent, a patent that's very broad, very nice and strong, that nobody else has worked on, a technology that has commercial value, which means it's a good innovation, not a good invention only, and then that it has been fully vetted, and that all the data that is needed for this particular technology has been taken care of. Like I mentioned, every patent is different. So the US patent is going to be different from the Indian patent. There are some small tweaks, and I'll encourage you to go to your patent office to figure out the differences. But in general, I can say, just by mapping it out on the slide, that most of these patents are very similar. And so if you have basically crossed the 4 key checklists, as I mentioned earlier, you should be good as far as filing strong patent is concerned. So going back, once we have the evaluation done, an IP protection is done, we go ahead and market these technologies, and we look for a partner. So marketing is pretty straightforward. We put it up on the website, we look into our Rolodex, we look into our contacts, we contact companies, and we show them the technology in a non-confidential way to say, hey, we have a patent around this technology, would you be interested in commercializing it? So if they want to take a look at it, then we going into confidential agreement if necessary, to make sure that they take a look at the patent and don't disclose it to the public. And there are several other tools that we use, like the materials transfer agreement, or the evaluation and option agreement, or interinstitutional agreements, to make sure that we have shown them the technology well enough before they are interested to partner with us. Now, if they do end up partnering with us, we get into a license agreement. This is the key for all tech transfer offices. Again, I will just glean through it. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I just want to mention that if you want to ever consider a license, what you really have to do is for the sake of having your license given off to a licensee. So a licensor is the university because they have the patent, and a licensee is the company that is taking the license. They get rights to the patent, and in lieu of getting rights to the patent, they give us bulk royalties. The way I envision it is just like as though you are a landlord and a tenant. Licensor is the landlord and licensee is the tenant. So if the landlord gives out the house for rent, they would eventually give ownership for some amount of time of their house, and the tenant becomes a temporary landlord. And in lieu of using that house, they're going to give rent back to the landlord. And that's exactly how the arrangement is done with these technologies, that the licensor gives out rights to the licensee, and the licensee gives back what we call not rent but royalties, except that the sophistication that is dealt in a license agreement is a little more, and that's what tech transfer professionals are good at. And we carve out a roughly 15-20 page license agreement that has all the details mentioned here, and basically make sure that the patent is given off to a company that can eventually go and commercialize it. Now, if all goes well and they are successful, they give us money back to the university. We take the money and we eventually give 33% to the inventor. So every university has a different arrangement. We give back almost 1/3 of what we get to the inventors to reward them for their wonderful invention. And all those list of inventors that I showed in the previous slide actually are pretty rich now from the revenues they've gotten. And some of it is retained back in our offices to make sure that we can use this for the purposes of our own research and operations. But if there is obviously co-inventors, a split of the money that they get is also done depending on what they eventually want to do. So this is the size of my office. You can imagine that a lot happens in an office of our scale, and that part of the reason why the office is big is because it's not confined to just tech transfer and intellectual property, but we do a lot of collaboration work. We do a lot of startups. We assist with a lot of grant writing for from federal agencies to faculty members, and so a lot of nuances go. And I'm envisioning that if offices like yours at IIT eventually do the job in the way we do it, similar kind of activities will happen, and so you will see some of the successes coming exactly the way we've gotten in the last 40 plus years of the implementation of the WIDO. So here is once again a website I wanted to show. If you want to get some more examples, feel free to visit the website. Once again, I mentioned Autumn as one of the largest associations with 3,000 plus members, comprising of tech transfer professionals. They have most of the information that you need, and they keep updating these success stories on a virtually a weekly basis. So keep in track. You can always click and check their website. You can get some real good information about what's happening, and I think I mentioned a few, and there are tons of other great examples of technology transfer on this website. Also, you can get information about career opportunities. You can get information about the entire functionality, and a lot of great sources of information for anybody interested in the tech transfer space. We have been very prolific in the US community and abroad to try and assist with COVID-related inventions. So there have been some guidelines that Autumn once again has eventually put together, and which many universities have signed, where many technologies have actually gone into the marketplace in a very short time that are related to COVID-related activities. And so this association once again has been prolific in working in this space. India, of course, is stepping up its activities. So like I said, I do a lot of consulting with many Indian firms. And one of the reasons why India is prolific is because of the National Intellectual Property Rights Policy that came out in 2016, where there were 7 objectives that were put together, one of which, of course, is the IPR awareness. And I'm presuming that this talk is also going to be sort of falling in that space. And I do fly out to India oftentimes to provide as much as possible for awareness for the Indian government as is needed. But once again, all the members of Autumn and all the members of the tech transfer community are very friendly. And for those who are interested in getting into the space and wanting to learn more, we are always there at your discretion to assist you with anything that we can help you with. There are folks that come to the US regularly a meeting that happened just before COVID happened, and international flying was much easier on February 22nd of 2020. And literally a month later, of course, everything was on a standstill. Was delegates that came from the Indian Agriculture Research Institute at University of Delaware. Dr. Harsh Bias coordinated this, and they came over and learned a lot about technology transfer and all the neat technologies they have, which they would want to eventually try and commercialize. So we provide these services on a regular basis. For those that are interested in developing careers in tech transfer, again, a lot of resources are there. I'll be more than happy to speak with, but I can just mention that if you have a background in sciences, mostly either life science or physical sciences, or if you have a background in law or in general a business degree, and you are willing to actually accrue other skills, tech transfer is a space that is great for those who want to eventually be in this space. And I'm, again, like I said, I think there will be a shortage of manpower in the tech transfer space going forward, because there's a lot of activities going on in this area. And some of these agencies that anybody is interested to join could be either consulting firms, law firms, regulatory agencies, tech transfer offices like myself. They could join the business development sector, which is in any of the private companies that are actually looking to do what is the flip of what academics use, which is to actually acquire technologies, or they could be in the compliance offices or work international jobs, or simply be educators. So all these opportunities are available for folks that have a skill set which is in the combinatorial space of science, business, and law, and of course are interested in working with new innovations and bringing them to the commercial marketplace. Once again, I have done this really quick, and I tried to make as much justification to this as possible, but I will leave my email address and my phone number for anybody who would want to contact me for any specific reasons or any specific aspects of this talk. And if there is anything I can assist you with in the space of technology transfer, I would be more than happy to help you with. So I realized gone way above my 30 minutes limit, but it looks as though there are many of you who've already joined. And if there is anyone that has any questions, I'll be more than happy to defend them maybe in the next 5-10 minutes. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague here.
Thank you, Joy. I really we enjoyed your talk. Now it's the floor for